Hey! Welcome to episode 247 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and I have a secret for you. Maybe leaning closer. Okay, are you ready? You know what? I have a speech impediment. Wow! I um yeah yeah my I false secret alarm. That's not a secret at all. Every time I open my mouth, people can hear my voice and know I have a speech impediment. But I've had some major challenges in my life, including a lot of anxiety from late grade school into my 30s that were hidden. Today I have a very gifted guest who's been on Awkwardly Awesome podcast before, and we're going to be talking about the hidden invisible aspects of challenges, specifically our disabilities. I'll be back with more, but first, this.
Today's guest, Ryan Groenweg and Jason Freeman.
Hey, welcome back. You know we all experience we all experience challenges. Some of these challenges are easy for those around us to spot, while others may be utterly invisible to others. For instance, every time I speak, my speech impediment is heard loud and clear by everyone within earshot. On the other hand, my friend and colleague, Ryan Groenweg, experiences Usher syndrome, which involves hearing loss and progressive vision loss. For most of his life, Ryan has been able to conceal his disability from the people around him in a way that I have never been able to hide mine. Please. So today, Ryan and I are going to have a conversation where we both share about our experiences with our disabilities and in life. Please welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast return guest Ryan Groenweg. Yay!
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Ryan, for being here first of all, and for the last. Has it been just about a year now since we started working together, right? A year and a half?
I think a year and a half now, actually. I think we first met each other like around April of 2024.
So to me, it's been an amazing year because I've just never had that many people have felt comfortable talking about my disability with in detail. I talk to everyone about it to a certain extent, but there's a different level of conversation that I find I can have with you about it.
Yeah, I think when you and I first met each other, we really had no idea of each other's stories. And so there was April of 24 when we got together. I think I did my presentation first. Then after that, you followed up with your presentation. And I just remember immediately thinking, oh my gosh, how how incredibly cool it is that we both have these perspectives about our disability, and our journey in life with our disabilities and what we've done to address it over the span of our life. And yet we're so different in how we approached it. So there's this really unique contrast between us. And yeah, you and I have met now. We've done some presentations at different events, kind of highlighting that contrast. And it's, I think, been really well received.
Yeah. I feel lucky that it's been so well received. It's interesting because our disabilities are so different. I mean, my speech impairment and coordination differences. Like I was telling you yesterday, I did literally went through a shot put backwards during a track meet.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I still have a hard time visualizing how you manage that, but yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'll give you two reasons: lack of coordination and lack of confidence in seventh grade, and in that you had the feat of throwing a shot put backwards somehow. I think maybe I spun too far.
Spun too far. Well, you know, shot puts aren't light; they're super heavy. And so if you're gonna throw it, sometimes that ball just has this momentum of its own, and I can see where that might happen. I had a similar experience in school too, except when when I was going through that experience, nobody knew the reason for my struggle. It wasn't apparent. I'd mentioned I was a pretty decent athlete, not somebody that was going to compete in college or anything, but I was a decent athlete in high school, and I wrestled on the varsity squad, played football, and did really quite well athletically. My vision wasn't so bad, but I struggled with night vision, and I can remember um, one of our classes in PE, we had to do handball, and I was matched up against somebody who was not known and did not participate in sports or athletics. And we played handball, of all things. This is back in the 80s. And it was in a very dark environment. And I got beat, like, I don't know, if we had to play to the score of 15, I didn't score a single point. I got beat 15-0, and I think we had to do 2 or 3 sets of it before I think we were done. And I lost all three, didn't score a single point. And nobody questioned it. They saw that this classmate of mine wiped the floor with me, even though, for all purposes, I was probably considered a better athlete. And the teacher, nobody ever asked about it. And I was like humiliated by that experience. I remember that.
How so we share, like, at least in the moment we you were humiliated by the experience, and I remember being repeatedly humiliated by my ventures into sports. How did you deal with the humili- humiliation?
I think I probably did what maybe most boys did in the 80s. I took it and I just stuffed it way down. I never talked about it. I didn't say anything. I was quietly angry. I think I directed a lot of that anger inward at myself, and I felt like I should be able to win, but I also knew why I couldn't win, and it kind of felt, frustrating and unfair. How about you? Like when you threw the shot put, and you said you were kind of embarrassed by that as well, that experience.
Yeah. That's
What do you
not
do?
cool.
No, it's not cool.
At the time I was stuffing it down, and also I cope with sporting disasters like that, things like heart disasters by quitting. I never threw a shot put again in my life after that. I don't think. And in in sixth grade, I went out for the YMCA team, and I scored no points all season, and I never play for a team again. Um, I mean, quitting things is not the best way to cope, but I definitely did cope that way.
Yeah. So I mean, I would get angry and I would cope with the frustration by kind of internalizing it and directing it at myself. And I think it tended to make me a little bit more competitive in some of the sports that I was able to do. Like wrestling, I hated losing and I hated being perceived as somebody that didn't win, and that certainly drove me in other ways where I didn't my vision didn't impact that. um, yeah, yeah, totally get it.
When you were diagnosed with Usher's, what do you understand about it?
Oh my gosh. So I had an older brother, and I think that's kind of what started this, Jason. So this is back in the 70s, and I was an elementary child, probably in, you know, 6, 7 years, 8 years old, maybe. And my parents knew I had a hearing impairment by that point. I was, fitted with a pair of hearing aids as a very young child that I absolutely hated wearing. And I had an older brother who also had a hearing loss, but because he was older, some of the issues with his vision started to become apparent, and he was struggling to see at night, and he was struggling in low lighting conditions. So they brought us in to see a doctor, who then said, "Oh, there's something going on with the older brother. It could be genetic. That could affect all of the family members." So we were sent down to Iowa for testing. So when I was going through that testing, and they came out and said, "Yep, of the four of us, there were four kids. Two of us ended up having a diagnosis of Usher's, my older brother and myself, and they kind of made sense. We both also had hearing loss, um, but at that age, I don't think I really understood the scope of it. And you know, I think it's a generational thing. The period that I grew up in, it wasn't really something that I was told a lot about, like what to expect. I understood that I had a hearing loss, and I kind of fought that with my hearing aids and the attention on that. But nobody really ever talked to me about my vision, so I had no idea um, what it was going to look like going through school or as a young adult at all. It's something I really didn't start learning until I was older. I imagine. I mean, hearing how it started for me, did you have any idea, Jason? I mean, you knew from a very early age that the speech impediment and the challenges that you were experiencing, they were kind of with you from the get-go, right?
Um, yeah, they were, but as a little kid, I was just confident being me, and I really, even though I went to speech therapy pretty young, I didn't really label it as a difference, as something to be nervous about, to be ashamed of, until I got midway, probably about fourth grade. I changed schools, and for some reason at that time, I suddenly became conscious Oh, I'm really different.
That
Yeah, and I don't want to be different. I like you. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be one of the boys. I wanted to be good at sports.
I so you would say you started to feel that in first grade already in elementary school?
Oh no, I said in fourth.
Oh, fourth grade. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha. Fourth grade. Yeah. For me, it was a little bit later. I understood that I wore hearing aids, and there were some interpreters that were seated by me. I didn't pay attention to them because I heard well enough, but there were other students in my class who had more profound hearing loss and were deaf. It was like junior high. Junior high is when I suddenly showed up for school, and it was a different building. Suddenly, it was high school kids walking around, and I was painfully aware of just how much I stood out because, you know, the hearing aids and the devices that we had to carry from class to class to class and give the teacher a microphone, and then we would have our own FM system that we had to wear with wires, and it would go into our ears. Nobody else in the school, nobody else in our classrooms, other than two or three students that I was always with, had that, and it became like almost socially, you know, debilitating. It was so hard, and I just started to develop this resentment towards the fact that I had to do this or that I had these challenges. So that was hard for me to navigate. And for you, it sounded like it started a few years earlier, already in later elementary school, around fourth grade. What were you experiencing that made it harder? What was that? What made it shift?
What made it shift? I'm not totally sure. I I think I started really thinking about my difference, and then I became anxious about a- just started being anxious and worry more. So, and the nervousness made me more awkward, which in turn made me more self-conscious, which in turn increased my anxiety. It was this vicious circle, and then some events outside of myself happened. Outside of my disability happened. My best friend got hit by a car and died. He was out biking, got hit by a car and died. And then my grandmother died of brain cancer within a few years. So like everything kind of meshed together to create this downward cycle where where I found more and more wrong with who I was. And
So, so you had the physical and communication challenges, and it snowballed when other events in your life started to kind of add to that, which spiraled into a huge kind of a mental health crisis, is what I'm hearing you say at a very young age. And, you know, who did you talk to? I mean, what was your network or what was your support when you were young? How did you navigate that?
I didn't in seventh grade, like you said about the handball incident. I was just stuffing it all down, and by then I was worried about the news. Um, Back then there was the arms race between the United States and the USSR, but I just got so worried and I was stuffing it down, and I didn't think people would understand me, both literally what I was saying, and even more what I was thinking. So I was stuffing and stuffing, and in that spring, I attempted to take my own life in 7th grade.
Wow. In 7th grade, what happened? I mean, if you don't mind me asking.
Um, I left school without telling anyone. I ca- I came home to an empty house because it was a work day. My parents were working, and I attempted to take my own life, but luckily there was some sort of voice inside me that said, "Kill, this is not the way," and I called for help.
Well, thank God you made that call. And
Thank God.
yeah, and you are, here because it looks like you and I both have somehow, despite some really difficult experiences when we were younger, and I'm not equating, my experience with yours, but both of us had some unique challenges, and we're old now. We're really old. I'm a little bit slightly older than you, but we seem to be doing much better.
Yeah, I wouldn't. You were kind of leaning in on the really old a little more than I would have wanted,
Or
but that's okay.
that's well, I get reminded of that by my kids and my grandkids. And they like to rub my head and they like to remind me of how old I am. Did you have somebody then that was really significant during that junior high period? After that, you're kind of trying to come out of that experience, Jason. Is there anybody significant that played a role during the period after that that was helpful?
Oh, for a while I had a therapist after that, and even though at the time I didn't like going at all, I think that was probably really helpful, and then my parents were helpful, and one of the ideas that came to my family and I was that I would transfer schools to a private school, and just a change of scenery, new kids. I, for whatever reason, I was able to feel more home at this new school, which helped a lot. Yeah, so so you have had a very hidden disability in high school, but it was made visible by having the hearing aids and the interpreter and such. How did you deal with something you wanted to remain hidden becoming visible again? Was it your idea to make it visible?
No. If I could keep it from being visible, I would. I probably would have continued down that path. I'm 54, and I would say that my disability is outing me. It's forcing me to acknowledge it, because my vision is so poor. I really have a hard time in a lot of different situations navigating low lighting, uneven terrain, etc. I would be on the ground all the time, falling down or tripping over things, and I don't even try that. I had to quit driving 10 years ago. That's another indicator that there are some skills that I can no longer things that I can no longer do. Um, but yeah, ushers largely is considered a hidden disability because While I had a hearing loss, I didn't wear my hearing aids much when I was in school, other than in the classroom when I was absolutely made to wear it. I took it out. The minute school bell rang, the hearing aid dropped in my pocket, or my school bag. I mean, there's stories my family shares with me finding my hearing aid in the driveway because it fell out of my pocket and a car drove over it and it was mangled and they'd have to send it in to get repaired, or it went through the wash because it was in my pocket all the time. But I got very good at watching and observing my surroundings, and if people were talking to me, I heard well enough that if I picked up 50% of what was being said, I could kind of piece together the context of the conversation, still respond with somewhat of an informed perspective, But what I didn't know is the effort that I put toward hiding my disability and including not wearing my hearing aids. That 50% that I wasn't getting was critical. Um, there's a lot of misinformation just that I had no idea existed out there. You go through the 80s and then 70s and 80s and into the 90s, and you're refusing to wear any kind of hearing aid. You don't know songs, lyric. You don't know details, fact. You miss out on key details about people that you're talking to, interacting with. You don't catch the names of their children, or just all these details that you miss that later in life kind of comes in handy to be somewhat informed. And I have lots and lots of gaps in my knowledge when people talk about the past. So that's I'm reaping some of those consequences now. I'm having to kind of fill in those gaps later in life. But I hid my hearing, and my vision was progressive. But I mean, progressive means it starts at a point where it's kind of similar to everybody else's vision, then it just plummets. As you get older, you lose a little bit more, and you lose a little bit more. But it's so slow, so gradual that you don't notice the change. Not not You don't notice the change well enough to anticipate when suddenly you can't do something. So, you know, um, I would be playing in the yard with my kid, playing catch one week, and it seemed like they'd ask me some weeks later to play catch, and we'd go out and pick up the baseball and start playing catch, and I wouldn't be able to track the ball anymore, and it would just shock me. Like they threw the ball and I completely would miss it, and I wouldn't see where it would go, and suddenly I'm no longer able to play catch. So those are just examples of that progression. Um, and I was very reactive in the hidden aspects of my disability. I would get into trouble because I would put myself in situations that, because if I didn't hear correctly or I wasn't in a place where I could see very well, I didn't prepare for that. I would just deal with the consequences after. And sometimes that meant that I developed this exterior where I would never admit that it was because of my vision. I would try to cast that the problem elsewhere, cast it on other people, or because of this, or it's not fair. And I didn't take a lot of personal ownership in some of the problems that I handled. So ingrained was it that I was trying to hide my disability, unfortunately.
So somehow, if you were only catching half the information, how did you make it through college and then grad school?
Not very easily, I had an interpreter. She started with me in seventh grade, and I really refused to look at her. I was on an IEP. I didn't know it at the time, but I was required to have assigned seating and wear this hearing device and sit and follow and do everything that the teacher would tell me to do. And then I would battle her because as I was going through junior high, then by the time I was a freshman, I was really getting tired of being singled out or having to carry this device. And I started to have a lot of arguments with the interpreter, and I started arguing about wanting to sit there, wanting to sit in the back of the room with my friend. You mentioned it. You kind of wanted to be with the boys, the people that you socialized with. That was
Mm-hmm.
important in junior high, and that's a hard time to be singled out for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
So how did I succeed? I succeeded poorly, I guess. I fought and fought for what I wanted, which was to protect my pride and not to admit I had a disability, and I just didn't want that attention. But the interpreter that I was fighting with, she persevered, and she continued to take notes. She continued to capture the information I would miss, and she would put it in a mailbox in her office. And I knew what she was doing every week, because if I went in to the office at the end of the week and I knew I had a test in that class the next week, well, guess what? She had meticulously taken notes, of what was discussed in class. And then when I looked at her notes and I would compare them to my poor, limited stuff that I had collected, I obviously chose hers to study from, and I would do well. I was smart enough that if I had information, I could do well with the class, and so that got me through high school. It put me in the frame of mind, because I graduated with honors, so it let me know that I can do it with the right information. I can succeed. When I went to college, I didn't have an interpreter, and I didn't have anybody taking notes. And so I struggled mightily my freshman and sophomore year of college. And I was slow to adapt. Just seems like that's a theme, right? I react, and then I start to reassess, and I realize, okay, this isn't working. I need to do something different or I'm going to fail. And so then I had to start using a lot of strategies. I had to start to advocate a little bit, to ask for some help. And it was painful for me to take those steps. I hated asking for help. But I wanted to get better grades, and I wanted to get a degree, and that was more important. So, slowly I started to advocate. I sat in front of the class. I had somebody taking notes. I started to replicate some of the things that the interpreter had done when I was in high school, and that worked. I got much better grades. That allowed me to get into graduate school and continue on with my career. But it could have been so much easier if I'd have been willing and more cooperative.
You mentioned yesterday that in high school, probably the sign of the times, you didn't get to have much input or any input in the accommodations. If you had gotten to have input, what input would you have given?
I mean, Ryan today would give very different information than Ryan of 1984. When I was 14 years old, if I were invited to sit in on a meeting and explain why I was so angry, I don't know if I could have. I just hated the attention, and I hated being singled out. And so what I would have asked for is, yeah, don't make me wear hearing aids and let me sit where I want. I have a feeling that the teachers at that time would have said, we know better than you do, and that's not going to happen. And I don't think during that time they would have listened. Maybe today, I think disabilities are less taboo. I think having a disability or being singled out as somebody with a disability was a little bit harder in the 70s and 80s. People without disabilities weren't accustomed to being around people with disabilities back in those days. I think it's a lot more common now. I think we have a much better integrated society where people with and without disabilities coexist, and it doesn't alarm people, or it's not surprising. They're a lot more tolerant and cooperative. So I think it's a little bit easier now and more accepted. It was just harder back then.
Oh, I guess in the hearing aids today would be smaller and less
They are. The
visible.
technology is superior, so you can have amplification and not draw a lot of attention. What I'm wearing right now, it's unbelievable how much different it is. I have a lifetime of refusing to wear my hearing aid that followed me all the way into my 40s, Jason. So like 10 years ago, I would still wear one hearing aid, and I would only wear it if I was in meetings in different situations. Otherwise, I would take it out. I didn't find them to be very helpful in all situations. But they were helpful if I was in a meeting. And as a professional, that's hard. It made my professional life much more difficult. The hearing aids I'm wearing right now, when I put them in, it was almost overnight. I started wearing both hearing aids, sun up to sundown. I never took them out. I just put them in and forget about it, and it's allowed me to communicate and to function much better. But again, you were going through high school. You had two distinct aspects that you struggled with. You mentioned motor coordination, and then you also mentioned speech. Of those two, which of the two were they equally difficult? Was one aspect of your disability harder to cope with than the other? How would you describe that?
Good question. I would actually the coordination thing was just really hard because I think I would have liked to have been on a basketball team.
Right.
In retrospect, at least I would have liked to have played an instrument, maybe been in band, been in plays, but I didn't feel confident to do that with my. Or I used my disability at least as an excuse not to try those things in high school.
Were you on an IEP, Jason? I think I asked you that question before, but because I didn't know I was on an IEP. Honestly, I found out only because my mom kept records, and it was just in the last couple of years that I found them, and was like completely surprised to see that I have records going back to the 70s. This is all before kids were actually more involved in their own education and having the opportunity to put input. That's maybe more common today, but it certainly wasn't the way when you and I were in school.
It's such a good question, Len. I don't know. To this day, I don't know was I on an IEP. I
You might have a shoebox somewhere that your parents kept that's got a whole bunch of old IEPs sitting there. You never know.
yeah,
That's what I found mine.
so, yeah, maybe I'll come across it. So my coordination was hard in that sense that it excluded me from things, and and my speech was hard because it led me not to want to talk much. But the upside of it is I became good at asking other people questions to keep them talking because I didn't want to talk, which serves me well now having a podcast. But beyond my speech and coordination, I would say my third disability, which and this has never been diagnosed, but in high school I would call myself a very anxious person who worried a lot and who made simple things more complicated with anxiety. I would say that was especially going into college and early adulthood that was more challenging than either my speech impairment or my coordination differences.
You have some degrees in college, right, Jason?
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is that you were going into college and it was almost becoming even harder when you had the speech and motor coordination and coupled with some pretty significant anxiety. How did you manage that?
The one of the ways I managed it a lot in college was by starting to go for long walks. It seemed like the motion of walking and being outside would calm me down, and I loved it. So initially, for years, that's how I managed it. And in the last 15 years, I was challenged to do yoga, and then I finally did it. And yoga and now meditation really has helped me change my relationship with anxiety to a huge extent where now I wouldn't consider myself an anxious person at all. I never thought I'd be saying that, Ryan,
Well, that's
because I felt so anxious for so long.
awesome. I think I'm probably having more of an increase in some anxiety as my vision is diminishing. Right, there's an uncertainty of my future, and I'm finding myself kind of torn between being proactive and considering preparing for being blind, fully blind. Um, but then I have that internal conflict of that desire to still hide it, and so it's certainly a conversation I have within my family about what are some steps that I can do to kind of prepare for it. That's a journey for sure. You and I have both been on a journey. That's one of the things that really stood out when we were talking a year and a half ago. Um, I could just hear so many parallel and similar experiences and challenges being shared, but yet it was from such a different perspective than what I had had.
What would it look like to be proactive as you go into the next few years?
Probably one of the first things would be to learn how to use um, a cane to access my community, and I should be carrying it more than I do now so that it serves as a visual cue. So even if I'm getting assistance, from my wife or from others, it makes sense why I'm getting assistance. I'll see that I'm carrying a cane, and then there's that understanding. And I just hate that cane. I'm not a fan of it, and it represents the very thing that I've resented my entire life, and so that's an internal conflict that I have to work through and accept. Um, it's not been an easy journey for me. You know, there's a perception. I think when people run into me and they misunderstand, and it would probably help if they saw the cane, because I think people will sometimes see me and think that I am rude or aloof, but really I'm more unaware because I don't visually see them. If somebody tries to shake my hand and I don't reciprocate because I didn't see them stick their hand out to shake hands, or uh, I unfortunately, without having a cane, I'm not giving people a chance to really know what's going on. And so they make assumptions about me. They're incorrect, but I understand why they make those assumptions. Um, do people make assumptions about you, Jason? Are you finding that as part of being an adult? And when somebody first meets you, do they form assumptions that you think are incorrect?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's been a huge part of my journey. Cause like a speech impediment can mean so many things. It could be associated with intellectual disability from birth. It could be associated with someone who had a stroke. I mean, so like I've said in talks before, if I heard the sound of my voice, I might make assumptions.
Right.
And I mean, it's just part of what we do as humans. We make assumptions when we see things and we hear things. The talent, the skill, if you will, that lies can lie past that is to make an assumption and then go, oh, I just made an assumption. I wonder if that's correct. So personally, for many years, the word speech impediment was to me was like a white cane. I just didn't have it in my vocabulary. I hated when other people said I had a speech impediment. Ryan, I remember I used to work in homes with people who have various disabilities, and I would get so mad when I would answer the phone and someone would ask, is there a staff member there? I'd be like, I am a staff member, and and then in my mind I'd be like, why don't they know I'm a staff member? But how could they know?
Right.
So in more recent years, I experimented for a while with just when I meet someone telling them I have a speech impediment, which kind of works somewhat. But now I just when I meet someone, I just know how to get them on the same page of who I am really quickly. I just know questions to ask. I mean, a lot of if you get someone talking about themselves, at least for me, they'll instantly think I'm more intelligent because I appreciate them. It's odd. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, my experience with you, of course, a year and a half ago, I'd never met somebody that interviews like you, Jason. Some of the questions that you've thrown at me, they're just deep, deep thoughts, profound questions that have challenged me in so many ways. You have shown through this podcast and through other media and a desire to lean into your disability. I don't know if like your opening intro and you're like, hey, lean in. I got a secret for you. If that's one of your strategies for sharing with people all the time, but it's a good one because you steal the thunder. You don't make them think and wonder. You instantly call it out right away. I'm the opposite of that. I'm somebody that hangs back. I watch. I'm trying to capture as much information visually, but as my eyes fail, I'm not able to count on those. My ears aren't that great, and so I find myself in this kind of murky world all the time and reacting. And um, I'm late to the game. I'm late to this leaning into my disability and sharing about it. Being on this podcast is not something I would have easily agreed to do 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I'm opening up now and trying to emulate that. I have a lot of respect for how you do it and the way you do it. It's not an easy thing for me to try to emulate, but I definitely see how skilled and talented you are at this, Jason.
Thank you. I'm curious, what has it been like for you, Ryan? We've talked to like audiences of 100 people or more, and with the audiences you openly share about your disability. What is that like to go into a room full of people and say this is what's going on after you spent so long trying to hide it.
I'm still processing it. You know,
Mm,
I'll be honest. I think part of what causes me to hide my disability from the 70s, 80s, the early parts of my life, I think it was always the fear of rejection, the fear
mm,
of somebody seeing that I wore hearing aids or that I couldn't see in the dark or I struggled in certain ways, that they would say, "Oh, okay, not want to have much to do with me." I don't know why I believe that, but it was a very deep insecurity that I had, and I thought I would be rejected. And so I was very reluctant to just even talk about that with people, even my high school friends that I had going through high school with. I didn't really tell them about my disability. They knew I couldn't see in the dark, so I would kind of play that off as just having poor night vision. Um, but they didn't have any idea just how serious my vision problems were. Um, So yeah, when you and I this past year have done a handful of presentations in front of some groups of people, there's butterflies, there's some anxiety, there's moments where I'm hoping it's being received well. I don't. I think you and I have a nice contrast, and that's really been a lot of fun. I don't. I think it's been an overall positive experience. I've enjoyed it. I'm very much um, kind of learning how to do it though. You're like working with you, Jason. You're a natural, so you kind of draw it out of me a little bit, which is what I appreciate. I don't think I'd be doing it nearly as well without that, friendship.
thanks for saying I'm a natural. I mean, but then you also got to remember I have like 10 more years of experience with this, so I would I mean maybe in some respects I do like to be on stage. Oh, I do. There's no denying that. But I've also I've had so much time to practice. As you say what you just said, I remember times in my life where I was absolutely positive that people would hate me because I had a speech impediment. That they would hate the sound of my voice.
It's kind of odd how we turn our disability into kind of a monster within us, right? How
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that's what I was so right. Oh
yeah,
my god, yeah.
yeah, and so we can't see past it, and we can't fathom other people can see past it, you know. So yeah, I get it.
I guess if I'm being honest, when there was one person in my life who absolutely hated my disability day in and day out, do you know who that person was?
There was one person who hated your disability.
Yeah, yeah, who just despised it.
I think that I have a similar person in my life too, and I think it's yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get it. I can relate.
I
Um,
think, I mean, it's a cliche. We can be our own worst enemy, and I don't think it's just confined to people who have disabilities at all. But
no, I agree. I mean, we talk about major changes in life, right? Elementary school into junior high to high school, young that transition to college, being a young adult, going into a career. These are experiences I think everybody with or without a disability has to struggle with. And
mm,
having insecurities isn't unique to people with disabilities. People without disabilities have insecurities and personal struggles. So I don't mean to you know not acknowledge that, but sometimes you know having insecurities and life is challenging as it is, and transitions are hard, and being able to adapt, and you throw a few extra wrinkles into the equation of having a speech or coordination challenge or vision and hearing challenges, kind of spices it up a little bit. Makes it just a little bit tougher. Like okay, I'm in junior high, which is hard, and I don't know how to fit in with the right kids. Oh, and by the way, I have to carry this technology from the 70s, this big battery, and wear it on a Velcro belt. And there are 30 students in class, and I'm the only one that has to do this. It's a bullseye that's been painted on you, and you feel like, okay, why can't I just blend into the crowd and not stand out? That's all I wanted. I didn't want to stand out, but I was being forced to be standing out all the time. And yeah, so sometimes, having a disability seems like it's, like I said, that extra special sauce that makes you develop a little thicker skin, maybe develop some fight, some perseverance. Perhaps one of the outcomes for you and I, Jason, is a certain drive to try to overcome that, to not let our disability beat us in life, but to defeat our disability. And and that's kind of that's ongoing struggle, I guess, that we have.
I remember vividly a moment, I think it was in January, where both you and I were in your office building on a horribly cold day, and no one else was in the office building. But we were in the office building practicing a speech.
Yeah, I think it was the coldest day of the year. It was like wind chill of minus 9,000. It was like really cold outside. There was a wind chill, and it was maybe not quite that cold, but it was the coldest day of the year, I think. So everything was shut down, but we were still working on it, working on our craft.
Yeah, I guess we've had to have lots of persistence.
We're presenting next week. Now, I know this podcast probably will not come out before that, but we still have one more event on the horizon where we're going to share a little bit of this, right? We talk about our life journey, and then we add in a few stories as well, like that kind of highlights those struggles. Um, and I think that's the part that I enjoy. Like, there's this back and forth that you and I have kind of created, and it creates a little bit of humor and fun as we share our stories. Because at the end of the day, you have to be able to laugh, and you have to be able to find joy, and you have to be able to recognize that these struggles, they're not going to go away. They're probably going to get harder, but there's always friends, there's always family, there's always these resources. There can be a lot of good and joy. And I personally am hoping maybe that as I later in life share more of my stories, that it helped other people accept their cross that they have to carry, as I'm trying to learn how to carry my cross, and to carry it more easily. And so that's one of the things that motivates me.
What would you say to someone who's dealing with an invisible disability or challenge that really is weighing on them, but they don't want to share with anyone?
I think the solo journey is a hard journey. It's a harder journey than it needs to be. And I took the solo journey. I certainly had family and different people around me who knew my disability for many years now. But even within that, I wasn't very good at communicating or opening up or letting people in to understand that deep insecurity. And so the more I talk and the more I share, I think it's really impressing upon me how important it is for parents, if you have children who are diagnosed with a disability, embrace it. Embrace it, talk about it, educate yourself, help the child learn about it, help them prepare to be open. I met a family, they have a few children who have ushers, young children, and I was amazed because they were doing exactly what I wished happened when I was a kid, right? Their kids were wearing hearing aids. Their ear molds were like neon orange or yellow, so it was like bright. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's almost like, look at me, how cool is this? And
Mm.
they were very not insecure. They answered questions. They talked about their vision. They talked about where they were at in life, and they were just kids that were going through junior high. They were very. It was a very good example to see. And so I think that's what I would have families replicate is open communication. You know, what do you say? Like from your perspective, and it wasn't a hidden disability, even though you still carried some of that same internal frustration with having a disability. What would your advice be, Jason?
Um, I would say two things. One thing, when we have a disability, some challenges. For me, it was tempting to retreat from things and say, no, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And the more I said no to the things I wanted to do, the the smaller my life got. So I would really challenge someone with a disability or another type of challenge if they see themselves saying no to things they want to do, to really reconsider and and, and maybe try those things that are saying no to. When they try these new things, they don't have to be perfect at them.
Just
That's
experience it. Yeah.
yeah, there's so much joy in experiencing and practicing and getting better. Then I would also say, if someone's hiding anxiety, to uh, and stress, to know that you're not alone. People the world over are dealing with that, and just to start talking with people about it and start seeking answers, seeking relief. Maybe that's professional help. Maybe it's some type of exercise. Maybe it's yoga, but it's definitely start trying to do things to feel better.
Right. I
Oh
agree.
my gosh, this went fast. Do you have any last words, Ryan?
No, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think this is a small sliver of the many, many conversations we've had like this. You and I really enjoy kind of exploring this topic, and I think in a way it helps at least for me. It helped me understand myself a little bit better. I'm learning to kind of put words to long-standing struggles, and just having these struggles and being able to share them. I think this has been an awesome platform to do that, to share. And I'm always open if somebody wants to reach out or ask questions. If they listen to this and they're like, hey, I got a few questions about this, I imagine you throw some contact information in there that people can reach out.
Or how do they find you?
They
What's the easiest way?
Well, I work at the Center for Disabilities here in Sioux Falls, and if they want to reach me, they can reach me by my email address. So it'd be my first name, and then there's a period in my last name. So it's Ryan.Groenweg at usd.edu. USD for the University of South Dakota .edu. Send me an email, and then let me know if you saw the podcast or if you have questions about Usher syndrome or just anything related to that. I'm happy to respond.
Thanks so much for this friendship and for speaking together and for this conversation, Ryan. I greatly appreciate it. And please, I'm going to end the podcast now, but please stay on. It just takes a few minutes for everything to upload.
Sound good?
And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you found this conversation useful as you navigate your own life journey with the challenges you have and really just figure out how to live the best life you can and enjoy it as much as you can. Thank you and please tune in next week for another episode of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I was trying to make that dramatic, Ryan, but I don't know if I succeeded. Anyway, have a good day. Talk to you next week.
Bye.